Hey everybody, I'm going to make a video on this Zyxel problem that's come up recently. And for the record, you know how a lot of YouTube people will say, they'll start out their video by saying something like, people have asked me about blah blah blah. Just so you're aware, no one has asked me about this at all. Actually, usually no one asks me to make any videos whatsoever. Sometimes people will ask me for stupid crap though, and I'll just make a video because I've had to explain it like 1,000 times. That's probably the most common thing. But anyways, if you've been paying attention to tech news, you may have seen this, which is backdoor account discovered on more than 100,000 firewalls, VPN gateways, and other stuff. And basically, this is the account and the password for a whole bunch of Zyxel devices. So, and it talks about which ones, like which series specifically, and it's these right here, these right here. So, like one of them is this WLAN controller thing, which they're calling an intelligent wireless LAN controller. One of them is a firewall, which sucks because a lot of these things are security based, and yet they've put this backdoor in there. And I'm not sure if it was in this article or the other article, but apparently you can update your system and get newer firmware, which almost no one ever does for the routers and devices like this. The system admins might, but like home users wouldn't. But yeah, it's an administrator level backdoor, and I think it's hard coded as well. So until you change the firmware, you can't like just delete that account. Like it's in there no matter what. So anyways, to go over the devices, this wireless LAN controller, one of their firewall products, this unified security gateway, and finally this VPN firewall product as well. So that's a bunch of their stuff. And they're touting on their website a whole bunch of things specifically about security, and this is one of the least secure things that a company could do. And so, the question becomes sort of why, but also, if you look at this password and username and password, like sometimes companies will put in a really basic default password like admin for the username and password, but this one looks like it was purposely made for whatever reason. And yeah, it says unchangeable password and an undocumented account. So it's certainly possible that it was done for nefarious reasons by either some particular employee at the company or the company working on the orders of, whoever. That's the type of crap you hear about happening in places like China. But Zyxels are sold all over the world. And so, for instance, I have a Zyxel router myself here. Router, modem, Wi-Fi, access point, where I only use the modem portion, and I'll get to that in a minute. But it's also possible that this was done just for testing, so that with a hard-coded username and password, simply so that no matter what happens during testing, during like beta testing the software for this product, the firmware for it, so that someone could get in to change things if they messed up settings, and then they forgot to take it out when that beta testing went into the final product, and when they went from beta testing to the final product. That's possible too. So it's not necessarily, a nefarious thing. It's just a crappy thing from a company that's doing so much to tout security, and really causes people to lose faith when companies do bullshit like this. And because so many people have Zyxel products in their house, that's why I wanted to kind of make this. So, for instance, I'm here in Turkey, and most anybody who has, let me make this a little bit bigger. Most anybody who has TTNet, at least up to a certain speed anyways, will probably have this if they've gotten it recently, or might have just, like an older version of the same thing. I think this is an older version of the same. I'm not sure which one's older, but they're still giving out this black one to brand new customers as of like 2 months ago. And that's exactly what I have. And so for me personally, I don't really have a huge issue with it because this is not one of the products that was affected. But on the other hand, when you think about it, like this is the time where it was noticed that there was an undocumented, unchangeable admin username and password. It's certainly possible that plenty of other products have that same capability, where someone who knows about the password that's not documented and that user account could get into regular consumer devices like this, and it just hasn't been noticed yet by the security community, by the press, whatever. So that's sort of cause for concern. And I had done a whole video on my home network, but like most people's basic home networks, they've got their, people usually call it router, but it's actually like a router, a Wi-Fi access point, and also the modem all in one, like 3-in-1. And so you'll have the phone line or cable come in, and then that normally goes to all of your devices, either hardlined or through Wi-Fi, And that's sort of like the typical just home user connection. For me personally, I've got the phone line coming in to this exact device, Janice Seuss bud, and I'm not using the router or the Wi-Fi, but only using the modem capabilities of it. So basically it converts that DSL line that comes in to Ethernet, and then that goes to one computer, and that one computer is a pfSense router. pfSense router switch firewall. And the nice thing about that is it's totally configurable to my own personal needs and tastes and whatever, and I can change things. I can make the firewall either really strict or really open. I can open up individual ports. And all of that control that I have over the pfSense router is what any person would have over those other devices from having that password and username and stuff. So at any rate, then it goes from there to my other devices and to a separate wireless access point that I use, and to my server and all of that stuff. So this extra box in the middle here, though, this is like the firewall that I'm using effectively, because when I pass it through, it just sends like the raw internet. And in doing that, it also takes some load off of the device, and there's some other benefits too. But with this concern, since so many people, especially here in Turkey, have Zyxel devices, I would personally be concerned if I did not have that. Because, granted, if you're watching this video, probably nobody gives a shit about your personal data and no one's targeting you, but still, it's just sort of a privacy concern, especially when the news sends out the username and password for these devices. And so, a person could go in and remove your firewall or open up ports or do whatever. In a normal household, in mine, since I've got this little sort of lab thing, home lab set up, they're going to have to contend with the pfSense router switch firewall thing that I have. And that gives me really an extra layer of hardware and software security, totally, just completely. And the thing is, these routers are almost never updated. Usually a company will only update the firmware 2 or 3 times throughout the life cycle of one of these routers, because they're considered just throwaway commodity devices. And if there's a big security issue, they'll update it because the public sort of forces them to. Whereas pfSense is updated regularly. It can run on old hardware, it can run on new hardware, whatever. You can also buy devices already set up for it. So you can build your own, which is exactly what I did. Or you can buy one of these things. Like, for instance, even this little small SG1100, a guy I know looked this up, and I think he said it was, a few hundred tele, maybe like $100 or whatever. And you can see it's basically like a tablet in terms of like a crappy old tablet in terms of the hardware. But that gives you the firewall and all of this other extra security. So if you were to put this behind your router modem combo unit, it would give you the same extra security that I've got. I've got one that's probably more comparable in performance to something like maybe this one here, this XG7100, I would say, is similar in performance to what I have. Maybe even a little bit closer to this one. Mine's probably like somewhere in between there. But again, I built it myself. So anyways, The fact that there hasn't been any news about your or my home routers, that's good. But at the same time, it might just be that it hasn't been noticed yet. And the simple fact that Zyxel is so careless with what they're doing is bad enough anyways. Whether it's on purpose, whether it's just a mistake, whether it was a beta testing thing, who knows, whatever. But that's concerning. That should probably concern anybody. The other thing you can do, of course, is just buy a different router. Just use a different brand. So like, for instance, Asus is a good brand just all around for all of their computer hardware, but certainly for things like Wi-Fi routers. They do a lot of gaming junk and make them look like UFOs and stuff like that. If you've got one of those Zyxel routers, which unfortunately a ton of people here in Turkey have, honestly, I would do something different. Either have a separate firewall, make sure that all of the computers that are connected to it are up to date, make sure that you, at least know a little bit about it. A lot of people also, I think, don't realize that there's a whole interface behind this that you can go into, which I'm not going to go into mine, but I can show you quickly anyways what it kind of looks like. You get this stupid warning too, which doesn't really mean anything. But like if I put in my username and password, that's the router software. So someone could put in a username and password that's hard-coded into this, and get into your router and be in your network and then do whatever they want to do with your network traffic. So it's a concern that's in the news that I think probably, unless you're paying attention to like the nerdy tech websites that I do, probably a lot of people missed. But because so many people here in Turkey use that brand, and I'm sure in other places too, it's something to think about. Honestly, I would either get a new one that's some different brand and get it set up for your house, or get something like that pfSense firewall or some other brand of firewall to go behind it to isolate your devices from that Zyxel thing. And there's advantages and disadvantages of doing both. Obviously, I like having a separate modem and router and Wi-Fi access point and whatever, because it gives me more control. I can control the 3 devices separately and whatever. But for someone else, having an all-in-one is really convenient. And that's where going with something like one of these just regular Wi-Fi routers, but from a different company, might be a good idea. So yeah, that's all this one is. Just something interesting I saw in the news. So yeah, enjoy. Hopefully you don't get hacked with some other crappy Zyxel product that's in your house.